The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes?
Greetings. I'm Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer of the USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for Stardate -25-1962.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about the use of resistance training in mission readiness. But before that, let's do the regular stuff we have to do. Let me first introduce you. This is Harris, who's decided to interfere with my work as usual. Where was I? Oh, yes. The usual stuff. So the usual stuff is to say that we record these sessions at 12:30 South African Standard Time on a Tuesday. We are live in the Discord, in the channel called Screening Room in the Dauntless Discord. If you're an active duty member of the Dauntless crew, you're welcome to join us here for these live recordings. Participate in the chat. You can interact with the rest of the crew. You can ask me questions, drop comments, whatever you like. Alternatively, if you're not an active duty member of the Dauntless crew, you're welcome to join us on YouTube. We do our best to stream live there at the same time. It looks like it's working this time, so hopefully if there are any comments or questions that come through from the chat there, I'll be able to see those and respond to them as well. If you would like me to respond to a comment or a question that you've left during the course of the recording, please make sure that you @tag me so that it's highlighted on my screen. So when I get to the Q&A section at the end, I can scroll back up and see which ones are directed at me, as opposed to just vibing in the conversation, which is perfectly acceptable, nothing wrong with that, but it can often be quite a long chat thread, so going through every message to see what's relevant to me can result in some dead air during the Q&A. So let's make sure that it's flagged for my attention so that I see it when we get to that point. But who am I? Who are we? What are we doing here? Those kinds of questions. So as I mentioned, I'm the commanding officer of the USS Dauntless. The Dauntless is a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, which is the world's largest organized fan-run Star Trek fan collective. We have chapters, hundreds of chapters in dozens of countries around the world, thousands of members, and the Dauntless is one of those chapters. Starfleet uses the metaphor of a starship for its chapters, and the USS Dauntless is one of those starships. There is obviously no actual starship. It's just a metaphor. It describes the ideological and organizational ties that bind our crew together. Our chapter is based officially in Cape Town, South Africa, but we have our digital base of operations here on Discord, which means that we're not limited specifically and exclusively to Cape Town. We have members from all over, and I see in the chat we've got members from Johannesburg, South Africa, and as well as the UK. Good to see everybody here today. But what is the Dauntless about? The Dauntless is a future-focused advocacy and action group that is inspired by the Star Trek feature film and television franchise. We see in that Star Trek franchise a depiction of a world which we think is pretty cool. It's one in which most of the major problems that we face today, poverty, disease, crime, war, all of those have been all but eradicated through a number of developmental processes that have occurred over centuries. And we think that it would be pretty cool if our future actually did look like that. So we are dedicated as an organization to do what we can in the here and now to help move this world towards that ideal. So that's what we're here to do. But the way that we do that is, it's not about international scale politics or anything like that. The way that this guy, I don't know what to tell you. He's been sleeping in his bed next to me all morning, and now he's doing this. Anyway, the way that we try to bring about that change in the world is by exerting influence where we can to try and make things better in areas where we have the ability to do so. And we start by doing that in ourselves, by improving ourselves, improving our own lives, and then by strengthening ourselves, by increasing our capabilities, we can then extend our sphere of influence and our sphere of benefit to the people around us, and so it goes. So we might not be able to change the course of history with a single act or a single meeting or a single event, but we can make small changes here and there that can influence, hopefully, the greater course of history a little bit at a time. Yes, thank you, Captain. This is the test of focus, having to concentrate with this guy. Fortunately, I'm relatively used to this. If my camera was better, you'd be able to see the absolute state of this chair. He is completely wrecked it. So this is not an unusual thing. All right, let's get on to the concept, the topic of today's briefing, which is mission readiness resistance training. So we've spoken repeatedly about mission readiness in these briefings in the past, but let's just go over again what mission readiness means in this context. So mission readiness is the discipline or the doctrine that we espouse here on the Dauntless, which is becoming the best Starfleet officer that you can be, right? By improving yourself in any way and every way so that you are constantly expanding on your capabilities. And so that manifests in what I call the 3 pillars of mission readiness: physical, mental, and spiritual. Or you could also describe them as physical, cognitive, or emotional. Essentially, those are the 3 pillars of mission readiness. They are not separate in any kind of real underlying kind of way. Harris's brother Huey has decided to join the chat, so he is going to be participating in this mayhem as well. I don't think anybody's going to get any concentration done today. You might have to just put something else on the screen and listen to my voice instead. This is ridiculous. Anyway, where were we? The 3 pillars of mission readiness. They don't describe things that are entirely separate. They are just practically distinct. So, for example, physical readiness, we're talking about how the body must be capable of performing demanding tasks reliably and without injury, which means it invokes things like strength, endurance, mobility, and overall health. That's the foundation of operational capability. And my screen has just gone. Did one of these cats do this? What has happened? Apologies. My workstation has been malfunctioning for the last couple of days. I think it might be time for a complete rebuild. Hopefully this hasn't killed the stream. Let's see if I can get back into my console. There we go. Everything looks like it's still working. The chat is there. Stream is there. Apologies once again. The forces of the universe are conspiring against me today, but we forge ahead nonetheless. And now we talk about cognitive readiness or mental readiness. And this is about how the mind needs to be able to think clearly. So that's analyzing situations, making effective decisions under pressure. This pillar includes knowledge, skills, critical thinking, and intellectual development. And then there's spiritual or emotional readiness, which relates to how officers must maintain psychological stability, discipline, and resilience. So emotional readiness, if you have it, if you build it, allows individuals to remain calm, focused, and professional, especially in stressful circumstances. Now, resistance training, which is what we're talking about today, falls primarily under the physical readiness pillar, in that it is an intensely physical activity. But as with all mission readiness instances, they actually cover all 3 pillars to some extent. So what we're doing with resistance training is it plays a central role in maintaining a strong and durable body. But like most aspects of mission readiness, it draws upon the other 2 pillars, mental and spiritual. So from a cognitive readiness perspective, effective resistance training requires knowledge and analysis. And we'll go through some of the details about how this works as we proceed today. Officers need to understand training principles like progressive overload, recovery cycles, exercise selection, nutritional support, planning workouts, tracking performance, adjusting loads, interpreting the body's responses. These are all intellectual tasks that are part of the discipline of resistance training. And from an a spiritual or emotional readiness perspective, resistance training demands consistency and self-regulation. So strength isn't built in one session. It's not something you just go and do. It's something you have to do over and over again, repeated effort over months and years. And maintaining that routine requires emotional discipline, the ability to manage your motivation, to tolerate discomfort, that's a pretty big one, and to continue training even when the progress is slow or when fatigue is present. So for this reason, the three pillars of mission readiness aren't separate domains. As I often say, they are functionally distinct aspects of the same system. The body, the person is actually all just one system. Physical training develops the body, the physical meat of the body, but it also cultivates mental understanding and emotional discipline. It doesn't just cultivate it, but also requires it. Each pillar reinforces the others. Next is why resistance training matters, but it occurs to me I haven't actually explained what resistance training is. I mentioned it, I have mentioned it a few times in these briefings before, but let me just define it before we continue. Resistance training is the discipline, it's a form of physical exercise in which you supply resistance to a muscle or muscle group in order to promote it or trigger it to become stronger. So that usually means applying weight. So when you're moving an arm, oh, by the way, let's hope he's moved on. I'm wearing my Class C uniform today, which I usually prefer to wear a Class B. I prefer to be a bit more formally dressed, but I'm wearing a Class C today for two reasons. Firstly, it is approximately the same temperature here in Cape Town today as it is on the surface of the sun. And my SDU, although it might look like it's made out of space fabrics, it is not. And secondly, I need to be able to demonstrate things a bit more physically today than my normal SDU would allow. So I've opted to wear my LU today instead. So I apologize for the slight reduction in formality, but it does still meet uniform standards. So I trust nobody is too offended by it. So resistance training is when your muscle is contracting and you push against it, that is offering resistance, right? Resisting against the muscle there. That's resistance training in a nutshell. But we're going to get into a lot of detail about how resistance training works, why you'd want to do it, and all of that kind of thing. So we're going to start with why resistance training is important. Resistance training is demanding, but from a mission readiness perspective, it offers one of the best returns on investment available in terms of the amount of effort that you put into a pursuit that is capable of yielding results that make you more capable. So, unfortunately, it is time consuming. If done properly, it's going to occupy several hours of your week. It's uncomfortable by design. If it's not uncomfortable, you're doing it wrong. And it's effortful. It's hard. It takes a lot of mental and physical energy to deploy to engage in resistance training. That's just how it is, right? But the cost to benefit ratio is overwhelmingly favorable when it comes to resistance training. Very few activities that you can engage in the world improve your strength, your durability, your body composition, your bone density, your metabolic health, your long-term independence. So that's health span. In other words, being able to do things on your own without assistance well into your old age. In plain terms, resistance training is hard, but the return is absurdly good, right? It's really, really efficient. Even though it's hard, what you get out of it is far surpasses what you're putting in. And what you're building essentially is strength and functional capacity. What does that mean? Resistance training increases your force production, the amount of force that you can produce from your muscles. Force production is the amount of force a muscle can generate against resistance. And resistance doesn't have to be extra weights, by the way. It can just be gravity, right? Its own weight. Muscles adapt to repeated challenge by becoming better able to produce force. As you challenge your muscles, they grow stronger and more efficient. And this improves your real-world functional capacity, not just in terms of any given muscle group, but in terms of your whole body and as a person. Your functional capacity is the practical ability to perform physical tasks. So that's not Again, not just doing bicep curls, that's carrying, lifting, pushing, pulling, climbing, bracing, getting off the floor. That becomes increasingly important the older you get, catching yourself when you stumble. These aren't gym tasks, right? These aren't things that you do in an isolated environment. These are life tasks. These are things that you have to do every day. Why this matters is because a stronger body performs ordinary physical demands with less strain. And that gives you a greater margin of safety, meaning that more capacity than the bare minimum required. So maybe when you're carrying the groceries in from the car, you're straining at your absolute limit carrying those 2 bags of groceries. But imagine how much better it would be if you could carry 4 groceries and still have reserve left. The only thing that's holding you back is the amount of bags you can physically fit in your hand. Isn't that going to make your life more efficient? Of course it is. Mission readiness isn't only about barely coping, it's about having reserve capacity. So you've got something left. So let's say that example again, you're carrying those groceries in from the car, and you've got your hands full and it's very heavy, and you have no reserve capacity. You trip on a cobblestone, you go down. If you've got a little bit of reserve capacity, maybe you've got a little bit of extra strength to reach out with an elbow, even though your arm is burdened down with groceries, to stop yourself from falling. Now you've not only saved all those groceries that you're carrying, but you've saved yourself from injury. Having that reserve capacity is always beneficial. What resistance training is doing practically is it's helping you to build muscle mass and improve your body composition. Now, what does that mean? So resistance training preserves and builds lean mass, which is a technical term. Lean mass is the body tissue that is not fat, but especially muscle. So it includes your organs and your bones and all that kind of thing. But in particular, muscle. That's what resistance training is mostly interested in. Now, muscle is not decorative tissue. It's active, useful tissue. Say it's not decorative tissue, it can look pretty cool, right? If you've got enough of it in the right places, that looks pretty good. But that's not what it's for. It's not there to look good. It's there to do stuff. So muscle improves your body composition. So body composition, another technical term, is the proportion of fat mass to lean mass. So fat mass is how much body fat you have throughout your body. And again, you've got 3 kinds of body fat. The 2 kinds that most people are acquainted with is your subdermal adipose tissue. So that's the fat that sits just under your skin. So when you're pinching yourself like this, you can see how much subdermal adipose tissue you have. Then you've got your intramuscular adipose tissue. So that's fat that's sort of marbled into the meat of your muscle. If you think of having a nice juicy steak, when you cut into it, you'll notice that there's a fair amount of fat inside the muscle fibers. That's that intramuscular fat. Humans have that too. But then the 3rd kind is the tricky kind. That's the visceral fat. That's the stuff that's inside and in between your organs. That's the stuff you can't really see. You can't measure directly easily. There are systems you can get that can measure that. You can do it with something like an MRI or a DEXA scan or something like that, can give you a pretty good picture of your visceral fat deposits. But that's hard to get to just with a visual assessment of looking at you or on a scale or something like that. It's the visceral fat. That's the one you have to worry about. But the other 2 aren't great either. And you want to optimize your body composition so that you've got the right amount of fat and the right amount of lean tissue. And that's what resistance training can help you to manage. So 2 people can weigh the same, but the one carrying more muscle is usually more physically capable because muscle is denser, it weighs more than fat. So I've got 2 people standing on scales next to each other. The one person weighs 100 kilos, the other person weighs 100 kilos. The one person the guy who weighs 100, who has a lot of muscle tissue, he's a lot more physically capable than the other guy who also weighs 100 kilos but doesn't have a lot of muscle. Why does that matter? Muscle supports movement, strength, and recovery. It also increases your energy expenditure, which means that the body uses more energy to maintain itself. So fat, remember, is stored energy in effect. It's chemical energy that's stored in your body. The more muscle you have, the more you're able to use that up. Muscle also acts as a kind of metabolic reserve. So in practical terms, more muscle usually means that you're more capable and more resilient organism. Another thing that you're building through resistance training, although you're doing it kind of indirectly, is bone density and joint stability. So resistance training stimulates bone remodeling, another technical term, which means the process by which bone tissue is broken down and rebuilt in response to stress, in much the same way that muscle tissue is broken down and rebuilt in response to stress. Right? The stimulus works a little differently, but the process is similar in principle. Your bones respond to load by becoming denser and stronger, in the same way that your muscles do. It also strengthens your connective tissues. So that's things like tendons, ligaments, fascia, and other structures that support and bind the body together. Your tendons connect the muscle to bone, and the ligaments connect bone to bone, right? Those all get stronger in response to load. What that means is it improves your joint stability. Joint stability is the ability of a joint to remain controlled and aligned under load. It makes you more stable on your feet, makes you able to more precisely manipulate objects in the world. Why this matters is that fragility, if you're getting older, you're starting to think about things like fragility. It often goes unnoticed until failure occurs, right? Resistance training reduces your fragility before that emergency arrives. You don't want to figure out how fragile you are when you fall down and break a hip, right? You want to avoid breaking that hip to begin with. And if you are subjecting your body to load, the muscles surrounding that hip joint and the hip joint itself are getting stronger all the time and more resilient to injury. So this is one of the central ideas of readiness, preparing the structure before it's tested. We want to make sure that it's ready. Another benefit to resistance training is metabolic health. So resistance training improves your metabolic function. Your metabolism, of course, is your body's processes for using and regulating energy. Energy comes into the body in the form of food, and then your muscle is deeply involved in how that food is broken down and used for regulating your energy reserves. It improves your insulin sensitivity. If you're the sort of person who is diabetic, or perhaps you've been diagnosed as pre-diabetic in the past, you know all about insulin sensitivity. Now, muscle is metabolically active, which means that your insulin sensitivity, which is how effectively your body responds to insulin in order to move glucose in and out of the bloodstream and into the cells, better insulin sensitivity generally means better blood sugar regulation, and your muscle helps you to do that, right? As opposed to body fat, which can act as an insulin repository, and that messes up the whole thing. Muscle mass also improves your glucose disposal. So glucose disposal is your body's ability to take carbohydrate from the blood and store it or use it appropriately. Carbohydrates is a form of chemical fuel that we consume, basically sugar. It gets converted into glucose, which is again a kind of sugar, and that's how it gets transported around your body. And that is one of the principal fuel systems that your various body systems need in order to function. Insulin is one of the substances that helps to regulate that process. And again, your muscle being metabolically active helps to make that process even more stable. Muscle tissue is one of the main places where glucose gets stored as glycogen. So it gets absorbed into your muscle tissue, and then it's available there when you need it. Why this matters? Poor metabolic health sits underneath many chronic modern health problems. I mean, diabetes is the most obvious one, but it's hardly the only one. Resistance training helps you to maintain your metabolic order, helps to keep things regulated by building that muscle mass. So, plainly said, it helps the body to handle fuel more efficiently and become harder to break internally. Let me restress that injury prevention and durability thing. So resistance training improves your tissue tolerance. Tissue tolerance is how much stress your muscles, tendons, joints, and bones can absorb before being damaged. It's tempting to think, especially when it comes to your bones, that your bones just have a set amount of tolerance, and there's nothing you can do to change that. That furthest thing from the truth. Resistance training can actually strengthen your bones. Stronger structure tolerates more load, more repetition, and more unexpected stress. What it does is it improves your movement quality. Better strength and control help the body to distribute force more efficiently. This might not feel like a big deal until suddenly it does. When you no longer feel constrained in your movements, you're able to, this is one of the, what they call the symptoms of life, is you start to get a little bit stiff and sore and achy, and movement becomes increasingly difficult, especially as you get older. It's a symptom that's associated with age, but actually age has nothing to do with it. What it really is the deterioration of your musculoskeletal system. Your muscles, your joints, your bones get weaker, and that impairs your ability to move. All of those things are correctable through resistance training. By building that muscle back up, strengthening your bones, strengthening your joints, strengthening your muscles again, you can regain all that lost mobility that you used to have. Even if you're in your 20s and 30s, and you notice that when you get up from the couch, suddenly your back is sore. That can go away with the proper training. And the younger you are, the easier it is to train back out of that. That's the good news. The older you are, the harder you're going to have to work to do this. So it improves your movement quality because better strength and control help the body to distribute force more efficiently. So you're no longer putting all of your weight on this joint or all of your weight on that joint. Your muscles can compensate and adjust in real time in order to distribute your weight as effectively as possible. And that reduces mechanical stress in the wrong places. You're not disproportionately putting stress on your weakest joint, for example. So why this matters. Resistance training doesn't make you invulnerable. Reality is rude. Reality is rude, is what we say. But it does make you more durable, more resistant to injury. And a more durable body is less likely to fail under awkward movement, sudden effort, or repetitive strain. There's an anecdote I want to share with you about this. I have permission to share it because it's not my anecdote. But as you know, my partner, Lieutenant Commander Patterson, she and I live in this unit, which is great. The thing about this unit is that it's double story. You can't see it, it's off the camera over there, but there is a staircase that leads to our bedrooms upstairs. And that staircase is a little bit pokey. It's got a hairpin bend in it, and the stairs are tiled, which looks okay, I guess. It's fine. We've got plans to improve it. But one of the things about the tile floor there means that it can be a little slippery, a little precarious. And we have both in the past fallen down those stairs. Commander Patterson has fallen down the stairs twice. First time several years ago, and the second time several weeks ago. So when she fell down those stairs several years ago, fortunately there were no serious injuries. She didn't break a bone or anything like that, but she was in a lot of pain. She was badly bruised. She could barely walk for like a week. She had to take a couple of days off work. She was in really rough shape. Luckily, again, no serious injuries, but she was really beaten up by it. It hit her pretty hard. And took her some time to fully recover from that. She had bruises for weeks after them. It was really pretty rough. When it happened again a couple of weeks ago, similar situation. She was rushing up the stairs or down the stairs or whatever it was, slipped and came tumbling down. What's changed in those intervening years is that Commander Patterson has embraced resistance training. Especially in the last year, she has gotten so much stronger. It's actually phenomenal. She's been weight training consistently. You can see her home gym setup back here over my left shoulder. She's been lifting weights and working hard, and she's put on a considerable amount of muscle mass in that time. Similar incident, you would expect similar injuries, except that that's not what happened. She was a little bit stiff and sore the evening that it happened. She was grumpy and not happy about it. By the next morning, most of the pain was gone. There was no discoloration, no bruising. The day after that, she was completely fine, fully recovered. There was no lingering pain, no lingering discomfort. The same incident happened to her twice, once when she was unfit and once when she was fit. When it happened when she was fit, no damage, not even a bruise, not even the slightest discoloration. She was just a little bit grumpy and sore for a couple of hours, mostly because of the adrenaline and cortisol that's triggered by that kind of a minor trauma. By the time that had worn off, she was fine. She bounced right back. She was able to run, do her regular exercise the next morning unimpeded. This shows you the extreme resilience that can be regained through becoming physically fit, through building that muscle mass. And again, it's not just the muscle mass, it's also about strengthening your joints. It's about teaching your body from a neuromuscular point of view how to allocate your muscular resources to various places so that you can prevent injury and recover from injury much more quickly. It makes you more durable, not invulnerable, not bulletproof, but more durable. And long term, this becomes increasingly significant. So your aging naturally reduces muscle and strength. It's just a thing that happens. It's a natural deterioration. It's called sarcopenia, right? It means the gradual decline of muscle tissue and strength with age. Aging also reduces bone density and resilience. This is also something that happens with age, and that's what contributes to frailty as you get older and older. So It's your reduced ability to withstand physical stress without injury or loss of independence. But resistance training is one of the most effective countermeasures, not only to slow sarcopenia and bone density loss, but to actually reverse it, right? It helps you to preserve your strengths, make sure that you're increasingly mobile, and manage your bone density for a lot longer. I, for example, am I'm a lot less frail today than I was 10 years ago before I got seriously into weight training. Resistance training is one of the most effective countermeasures, and it's important because frailty isn't just about weakness. It's not just an inconvenience. It's the shrinking of your safe operating range. Your ability to function in the world safely gets smaller and smaller the more frail you become. Resistance training helps you to preserve your independence and your competence later in life. When I say later in life, I mean 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I've seen centenarians completing a park run, and they're able to do that because they have maintained that muscle mass well into their 80s and 90s through resistance training and other forms of training too. Many people unknowingly train for fragility by remaining inactive. So, as is so often the case, choosing to do nothing is not a passive decision, it's an active decision. You're making a choice to become more frail. You're training yourself to be frail. Resistance training trains you for the opposite, to be not frail, to be unfragile. And there are, as with all of these things, there's psychological and emotional and behavioral benefits to resistance training as well. So it helps you to develop your self-regulation. It's the ability to govern your own behavior, emotions, and impulses in service of a goal. We've talked about this a lot in terms of discipline. You don't get stronger from one heroic workout. You get stronger by repeating unglamorous effort over time. And it's that act of ritualizing and going over and over and over again that itself behaves like a muscle. The more you do it, the stronger that ability becomes. And that's a skill that's transferable to other aspects of life. You learning that skill of being able to do the thing you don't want to do over and over again because it's the right thing to do, because it's important, that can transfer to any other sphere of your life, whether that's your day job, your faith, your relationships. It all applies. That discipline is something that you can build simultaneously alongside your body with resistance training. It builds tolerance for discomfort. So the brain is an amazing thing. Something that is uncomfortable or even painful can be reframed in your perception so that you experience it in a very different way. And this helps you, resistance training helps you to do that in an observable way. It allows you, because resistance training is uncomfortable, right? If it's not uncomfortable, you're doing it wrong. It can even be painful. And progress in training requires that effort. It requires you to experience fatigue, which is also uncomfortable. It requires you to undergo inconvenience because, like I said, it's time consuming, and delayed gratification. That's an important one because it's going to take you quite some time to start seeing meaningful results. It's not something that you're going to see in a month, or probably not even in 3 months. To start seeing the results that you really want, you're going to have to be busy at this for 6 months minimum to probably several years. And that directly engages the emotional pillar of mission readiness, and it reinforces discipline and consistency. Showing up when you're tired, when you're busy, when you're discouraged, when you're unmotivated isn't just physical behavior, it's emotional management in action. And this matters because the ability to continue constructive action despite discomfort is mission critical skill beyond the gym. Resistance training becomes a practical rehearsal for that specific skill. What about the cognitive benefits? So effective resistance training requires analysis and planning. So what does that look like? That's things like exercise selection, understanding which exercises you need to do in order to optimize your resistance training regime. Load management, being aware of how many reps, how many sets, what weight you should be pushing. This is tied into interoception, your ability to monitor your own internal state, but also there's a cognitive aspect to this as well. It's simple arithmetic, it's not that difficult, but it's a cognitive load that comes with it. Frequency, being able to manage how often you're able to train each muscle group, because different muscle groups require training and recovery at different rates. Recovery is the next one that you need to manage. Nutrition, that's a whole other thing. We've spoken about nutrition before, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more today. Progression, how to manage and track your progress over time. All of those are cognitive tasks. They all live up here. So those aren't, that you're not training for that here, you're training for it in the brain. And this develops your practical literacy in training science. It's a bit of a grandiose term, but it's not wrong. Progressive overload is a concept we've spoken about before, which is gradually increasing the training demand over time. That's how you get stronger and stronger and stronger. That's how you keep seeing results over time. Recovery, the period in which the body repairs and adapts. Adaptation is essentially, that's the engine that drives this whole thing, which is the body's improvement in response to stress. This matters because good training isn't just random exertion. You're not just going to the gym and lifting that and pushing that and doing, like, that's probably not going to get you anywhere. It's applied physiology. You need to, as part of the discipline of resistance training, you need to learn about your body, how it works against itself, how it works against you, how it works for itself, how it works for you, and so on. It's not something you're going to learn overnight. It's going to take you a while to both accumulate theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge of your own body in order to successfully model a system that works for you. And that's going to take some patience and resilience and dedication as well. But the officer who learns to train intelligently is developing the cognitive pillar alongside the physical. So let's talk again about the costs versus the return. So yes, resistance training has real costs. It takes time, takes effort. It's uncomfortable. It can be repetitive. It can be so boring. It may feel intimidating or inconvenient. Those are two different things, but they both apply. But the return is massively disproportionate. The amount of effort that you're putting in, you're getting so much more out. Not right away, but eventually you will. A few hours a week sounds like a lot, and it is, but it can improve your strength, your muscle mass, your bone density, your metabolic health, your injury resistance, your long-term dependence, and your discipline. And this is the key point here of this section. The discomfort of training is real, but the cost of weakness, of fragility, loss of capability, and physical decline is vastly greater. Resistance training is one of the clearest examples of a difficult habit with an outsized return. All right, that's the why. All right, let's talk about how resistance training works. Yeah, okay, let's go through this piece by piece. So resistance training follows a cycle of stress, recovery, and adaptation. So first we do mechanical tension. So this muscles generate force against resistance. That's effectively what a muscle is, right? It's an engine that drives against resistance and generates force against it. First principle. Second principle is micro damage and repair. As you lift something that is on the edge of your ability, of your capability, of your range of strength, you are effectively damaging the muscle. This only works if you're lifting at the edge of your capability. So that means you're either lifting a weight that is very heavy for you to lift, or you're lifting a lighter weight, but you're doing it a lot of times, right? So that's high weight or high repetitions. When you start to feel tired, that means that you're working, but then you have to keep going, and you keep going, and then it starts to hurt, and you keep going. And only when it gets to the point where you can't do it anymore, right? You're now within range of failure. You get to the point where you literally cannot lift that weight one more time. That means you've now lifted to failure. That is the point where you have actually damaged the muscle. It's not a serious damage. It's not an injury. It's a microscopic damage. You've created lots of little tears and lots of little fractures in all of the muscle fibers throughout that muscle. And now your body is going to be triggered into repairing all of those little aspects of damage, right? So your training creates microscopic stress within the muscle fibers, which leads to the next step, which is hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is the repair process that strengthens and enlarges the muscle fibers over time. What that means is the body then comes in and it rebuilds all those little muscle fibers and fixes them and makes them a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger every time. So next time you go to lift that same weight the same number of times, and it's going to be a little bit easier. And maybe you fail on the same rep, you get to rep number 30, and now you fail again. Okay, fine. Your hypertrophy kicks in and your muscle builds back a little bit stronger. Next week you go back again, and now you're lifting the same motion again, and now you get to rep 31 before you fail. Hypertrophy kicks in. Next week you get to rep 32 before you fail, and so on. So this progress is going to be gradual. At first you'll start to see initial gains quickly, but then it's going to plateau out pretty fast, and then the progress is gradual following that. But that is the concept of progressive overload. What you'll then have to do as you get to too many reps for the same weight is you're going to have to either just keep increasing your reps or increase the weight. So now you say you're doing 5 kilos, 30 reps, and that's too easy. Then you increase the weight to 6 kilos, and now you're failing at rep 26. And then you go to 27 and 28 and 29 and so on. You get the idea. You're increasing your overall load, which is the weight times the reps per workout. And that is what the signal that triggers hypertrophy. But there's another effect that's happening at the same time. And that is neural adaptation. So the nervous system, so remember your muscles are all controlled by your brain through the nervous system. It's a little series of tubes, not really tubes, more like wires through your body. The nervous system becomes more efficient at rerouting muscle fibers. So when your brain tells your arm to lift the weight, it's sending signals to the various muscles involved in that system. And the more you do that, your brain and nervous system learn more efficient pathways in order to get that right. So it's going to send signals instead of to all the muscles in the area to engage. It's going to start sending signals to only the muscles that are engaged in that specific movement, so that you are able to do that movement more efficiently without wasting energy by engaging unnecessary muscles. And that neural adaptation, it's the process by which the nervous system becomes more efficient at producing movement and force in response to training. So in resistance training, this includes improved motor unit recruitment. So it's the ability to activate more of the available muscle fibers. Your motor units are special nerve cells that are linked to your muscle fibers that are triggered in response to desire to move something. It also includes better rate coding. So what that means is the speed at which those motor units are fired. So those motor units are now ready to fire more rapidly in response to that command. And it also improves your intramuscular coordination. So your different muscles are able to work more efficiently together. And it does a thing which is very cool, which is it includes reduced unnecessary resistance from antagonist muscles. So what are antagonist muscles? When you're talking about skeletal muscles, so these are muscles that are connected to your skeleton, virtually every muscle has an antagonist muscle. Let me give an example. So the bicep is here on top of the top part of your arm. And it is responsible for closing your arm like that, right? Lifting your arm like that. You can see my bicep is changing shape as it contracts there. It's doing the job there. But the bicep only pulls in one direction. It can't push itself open. So what is it that's opening my arm? It's the antagonist muscle, the tricep on the other side of the arm there. So you see when I flex my arm, this stretches out, and when I lengthen my arm, this contracts. This is the one that's doing the work on the lengthening. This is the one that's doing the work on the shortening. These two muscles are antagonistic towards each other. When you are untrained, your brain is sending signals to all the muscles in the area when it's trying to do an action, and you're going to be doing this, but it's going to be triggering your tricep as well. So your tricep is going to be working against your bicep while it's doing this action, which is not obviously a very efficient way of doing things. The more you do this action, the more often you do it, your brain is going to get better and better, and your nervous system are going to get better and better at activating only the appropriate muscles for the movement. So eventually you're going to get to a point where only the bicep is activating when I'm curling, and only the tricep is activating when I'm extending, essentially. So in practical terms, the brain and body get better at switching on the right muscles in the right sequence with less wasted effort. And that's why, it's the principal reason why, when you're just starting out with resistance training, you'll see significant strength gains rapidly early on. before you get noticeably bigger. So what's happening there is you're not putting on extra muscle mass very quickly. What you're doing is that neuromuscular development, which adapts more rapidly than your actual muscles do. So your neuromuscular development happens first, and then only once your motor units are firing at optimal efficiency, that's when the hypertrophy trigger starts to happen. So early strength gains are often driven less by hypertrophy, which is why you won't see an increase in muscle size early on. It's done by intramuscular efficiency, but then hypertrophy will start to kick in after that. The other way that resistance training works is it helps to remodel your bones. So weight-bearing activity actively stimulates increases in bone density. So again, it feels like your bones are kind of like a dead organ that just kind of sit there like a lump inside of you, but that's not true. Your bones are being regenerated constantly as well. And that regeneration process responds to external stimuli. The more weight that you put on your system more frequently, the more density that system is designed to create in those bones. So it will create stronger, more resilient bones. You might have heard that astronauts who spend a lot of time in space will lose bone density. That's the opposite of that effect. In a zero-G environment, it's not possible to do meaningful resistance training. So, well, it is possible. It's just a lot more difficult to do meaningful resistance training. So they will lose bone density because their body is replenishing that bone tissue. And it's like, well, why do we need to create strong bones where there's virtually no weight happening here? Once they return to Earth, they then have to embark in a disciplined regime of resistance training to help build that bones density back up again. And the thing that happens, so hypertrophy and progressive overload is working off a principle called supercompensation, which is a cool name. What that means effectively is that following the recovery, which is where your hypertrophy actually happens, the body becomes slightly stronger than it was before, which enables a gradual improvement. And that's how progressive overload works over time. Okay, those are the principles around resistance training and how all of that works. Let's talk about actually doing it. So what about the practical side of resistance training? What can or should that look like? How should we be doing it? So let's start with frequency. How often should we be resistance training? For general purposes, so this is not doing anything specific like training for an Ironman or for bodybuilding or other strength sports, weightlifting, powerlifting, that kind of thing. Just for general increasing your personal physical strength, you're looking at 2 to 4 resistance training sessions per week. And in terms of how you time those, you want to be allowing rest days for recovery between sessions targeting the same muscle groups. Generally speaking, the muscle groups that you would link together are ones that require similar movements to train. So you'll often hear people talk about push day, pull day, and leg day. Those, if you're doing 3 days a week, those are often the 3 that you'll do. Pull day is you're training muscle groups that require pulling things towards the body because it's engaging a lot of the same muscle groups. So that's your biceps, that's your back, things like that. Muscle groups that are pulling towards the body. Push day is, again, as the name implies, pushing things away from the body. So that's tricep, that's chest. Push day is that, pull day is that, and then leg day is typically abs and lower body. And you're pulling and pushing in the lower body all in one. Different people will have different theories and methodologies and preferences around how to structure those workouts, but that's a fairly common schema. I use a similar schema myself. What that does is it allows you to grant rest days to each of those muscle groups. So you're using all the muscle groups that are involved in pulling on one day, and that gives you a few days to rest before you use all of those muscle groups in a workout again. So even though you're training several days a week, you are still allowing recovery for those specific muscle groups in between. Core principle here, consistency over time is far more important than intensity in any single workout. So it might feel like you have to be pushing to absolute failure every time. And generally that is what you should be trying to do. But it's more important that you show up at the gym and do something than not do anything at all. Even if you're only pushing to failure every second time, as long as you're doing something on the alternate times, that's still going to be helpful. But pushing to failure or close to failure should really be the goal of most workouts, unless you're doing something different like a deload or something like that. So the core principles of practice, we've spoken about progressive overload, and that's what we're trying to do here. So it's the gradual increase of training stress over time in order to drive continued adaptation. As the body becomes more efficient at a given workload, and this is not only going to be as a result of hypertrophy of your muscles getting bigger, but also as a result of neuromuscular adaptation, the workload stops being a strong enough stimulus. So the demand has to increase through load, volume, density, range of motion, technique, or frequency. In other words, you have to make it harder. And there's multiple different dimensions in which you can make it harder in that way. The key is to apply enough stress to provoke adaptation while still remaining within your recoverability. You don't want to be pushing so hard that you can't recover in time. It's kind of difficult to push that hard, but you don't want to be injuring yourself, basically. But you also don't want to be lifting too light because then there's nothing to recover. You're not triggering that hypertrophy stimulus. Progress depends not just on overload, but on fatigue management, specificity, and recovery. Fatigue management is an important thing, and we'll get to that just now. So consistency, strength is built through regular training over months and years. We can't say that often enough. Okay, but let's talk about different kinds of movements actually when you're actually doing lifts, right? There are two broad categories of lift movements. There are compound movements and there are isolation movements. So compound movements involve multiple joints and multiple muscle groups working together. So examples of that are things like a squat, a deadlift, a bench press, a row, an overhead press, or a pull-up. So all of those are not just working one muscle at a time, they're working whole groups of muscles. So a pull-up is a great example that I can demonstrate here. As I'm pulling my body up, it's engaging not only the muscles in my arm and forearm, but it's also engaging whole sections of muscle in my back. A pull-up is a great compound movement. A bench press is similar. So I'm lifting the weight up that way, and I'm engaging again, not just my arms, my triceps, my biceps, but also my entire chest is engaged in the push-up. It's in the bench press. Push-ups are similar to a bench press. You're just facing down and lifting your own body instead of lifting a weight above you. Similar principle applies. So those are compound movements. Isolation movements involve mainly one joint or one muscle group, or even one specific muscle. So you want to try and isolate activity to just one muscle or just one muscle group if you possibly can. So this is something like a bicep curl. Let me show you what a bicep curl looks like under load, because just doing it without it doesn't really help. So as I'm lifting, you can see that only the one joint is in motion and only the one muscle is actually working. I'm working my forearm a little bit too because I have to grip the weight, but really what's happening there is just the one muscle is working. Tricep extension is similar. So it's basically the opposite of that. You're extending the muscle like that. Leg extensions, lateral raises, calf raises, all those kinds of things. Those are isolation movements. So these are ways of isolating a specific muscle and or joint and working only that instead of the whole system. Now, there are benefits and downsides to both of these things. So when it comes to compound movements, the benefits are there are more efficient use of time because you're working more muscles in one action at the same time. It's better for overall strength and functional carryover because you are just practicing just lifting a thing, right? You're allowing your whole body to kind of engage all the different muscles involved in lifting it off the ground and getting it up, right? So you're doing more stuff at the same time, and you are that then is functional carryover allows you to then apply that to other things. When you have to lift something heavy, you're just doing that action again. It allows heavier loading. You can put more weight because you're engaging more muscles in the whole activity. And it creates a larger overall training stimulus. You're getting a lot out of that one single movement. The downsides of it is that they can be more technically demanding. So getting the right technique for something like a really heavy deadlift or a really heavy squat can be quite difficult, especially if you're training alone. You want to make sure that your posture is correct. You want to make sure that you're holding your legs at the right angle. You want to make sure that you're holding the bar correctly. You're not holding it too high or too low up your back, those kinds of things. There's a lot of technical nuance to doing that thing correctly or optimally, both to ensure that you're getting the maximum benefit out of the movement, but also to avoid things like injury. When you're dealing with very heavy weights, injury is something that you always want to be careful to avoid. Um, so more fatiguing, obviously, because you're employing more muscles in the same action. It's going to make you more tired more rapidly. You're going to be able to do less of it, less movements per exercise because you're just using more of your body per movement. It's going to be less precise for targeting one specific muscle. So if you know you've got a particular weak spot, like this muscle is letting you down or this muscle is letting you down, it's much more difficult to target that specific muscle if you're doing a compound movement. Um, and if that is what's happening, if you've got a weak muscle that's somewhere in the cluster, that is going to impede your performance of the whole movement. So if you've got a weak tricep or your grip strength is weak or something like that, that's going to inhibit your ability to perform that compound movement. And trying to do that compound movement over and over again with that weak muscle is going to it's not going to be a suboptimal usage of your time. You probably want to consider then using an isolation movement to work that specific muscle. So isolation movements also have benefits and downsides, and the benefits being so you can target that specific muscle that you need. Either it's a weak spot that's letting you down, or maybe you even want to do it aesthetically. You want to have a bit more of a bump on your delts or something like that. You can target that using isolation movements. It's useful for managing hypertrophy. If you want to make sure that you've got sufficient muscle mass in a very particular area, isolation movements are good for that. It's easier to learn the movement because it's less technically demanding, right? It's easier to learn a concentration bicep curl because there are less factors going on, right? You can see, okay, am I holding my arm in the right angle? Is it in the right place? Okay, that's 3 factors instead of 20 different factors like you would have with a bench press. And again, it's useful for weak points or for injury management. If you've suffered an injury and you're trying to train back into your workout regime, using an isolation movement to work around the injured portion, as it were, to work the muscles around the injured muscle, or even to start working that injured muscle back in, that's going to be helpful for that. It allows you more precision in how you manage your workout. Downsides is that it's less efficient overall. It's going to take you more time to work all of those muscles because you can't do it all in one movement. There's less functional carryover. There's not a lot of occasions in real life when you're doing an isolation bicep curl to do stuff, right? So that movement isn't going to help you all that much with doing things out in the world. Sure, it's going to help make your bicep a little bit bigger, but it's not going to teach your body how to just lift something heavy. And they're usually less useful for building whole body strength, obviously. Now, how should either of these fit into your program? Ideally, you want to include both compound and isolation movements into a comprehensive program. Generally speaking, compound movements should form the foundation. So the bulk of your workout should be compound movements. Those big multi-muscle group motions that's where you should be getting most of your mass in. But isolation movements should be deployed strategically to support your compound movements. So again, you're isolating your weak spots, you're finding the specific areas of your body that need improvement, and you can work on those with isolation movements. A rule of thumb ratio for how to manage this is roughly 70 to 80% of your workout should be compound work, with the remaining 20 to 30% isolation work. But again, this is going to change depending on your specific goals, targets, needs. So to summarize the difference between those two approaches, compound lifts build the structure, isolation lifts refine the details. And for most people, the majority of training should come from the compound movements, with isolation work added to fill the gaps or to address specific needs. Compound movements train multiple joints and muscle groups at once, so they are more efficient and generally better for strength and functional readiness. Isolation movements target a specific muscle more precisely. So they're more useful for hypertrophy, for weak point training, and for accessory work. In most general training programs, compound lifts should make up the majority of the work, with isolation exercises added in a supporting role. Important thing when it comes to all of this is technique first. Correct form ensures that the intended muscles are trained and reduces injury risk. I haven't in my notes expanded on this as much as I probably should have, but technique is very, very important. You want to make sure that you're doing it correctly, because if you're doing it wrong, not only might you be wasting your time because you're not hitting the correct muscle groups as you should, but it leaves you prone to injury. You might be lifting at a wrong angle and you might actually hurt yourself by doing that. The way you build technique is you lower the weight slightly and you watch yourself in the mirror. That's why gyms have big mirrors. It's not so that you can go pose in front of them, or it's useful for that too. Essentially, it's about monitoring your own technique. If you're working from home and you don't have a big mirror, you can set your phone up with a camera and record yourself, and you can watch how you're doing it, so that that can help you to adjust your form, maybe adjust your angle, adjust how you're holding your back, how you're holding your neck, how you're holding the weight, whether it's pronate or whatever it might be. Technique is very important. Getting your technique right matters. And if you're lifting heavy but you're doing wrong technique, not only are you not optimizing your outputs, but you're risking injury by doing it wrong. Okay. Next important practical step is recovery. It sounds like recovery is just goofing off, and yes, it certainly is that, which is why it's probably the most fun part of getting swole. But it's also extremely important, so we can't overlook this vital component of getting big. Adaptation occurs during recovery, not during the workout. So the training, the physical workout part, actually lifting weights, provides the stress stimulus. That's what actually breaks down the muscle fibers. But recovery is the period in which the body repairs that damage, restores the energy, and becomes more capable than it was before. You can't have one without the other. You can't only work out because if you don't have recovery time, you're not rebuilding. There's no rebuild time. You're not making any gains. Recovery is an essential component of the process. And this is where concepts like repair and supercompensation matter. This is where they kick in. Repair is the restoration of tissues that are stressed by training. Again, you're making lots of tiny little injuries to your muscles, and repair is the obvious process by which those are restored. And supercompensation is the process by which the body recovers and then becomes slightly stronger or more capable than it was before. You're adjusting the baseline. Without adequate recovery, your training quality will decline. So your performance is going to drop. You're not going to be able to hit those weights like you were before. Your fatigue accumulates. You'll actually start to feel this after a while because it's not just physical fatigue, it's a nervous system fatigue as well. Your injury risk rises. You're more likely to actually hurt yourself, even lifting weights that are not too heavy for you. And your progress will slow or completely stall because your body just doesn't have time to restore itself after the last challenge. And probably the most important recovery tool that exists, in fact, unambiguously the most important recovery tool that exists, is sleep. During sleep, the body carries out much of this tissue repair, most of it, almost all of it. Your hormonal regulation, which is crucial to this whole process, it's the chemical engine that underlies how it all works, and nervous system recovery. Sleep also supports things like your memory, your mood, your cognitive performance, which means that it touches all three pillars of mission readiness. But all of those feed back into the physical hypertrophy side of things as well. So why does sleep matter for recovery? So resistance training creates the stress and the microscopic tissue damage. And that damage isn't harmful in itself, right? You're not injured. It's the trigger for adaptation, for hypertrophy. Once that signal has been created through applying stress, through lifting the weights, the body needs time and biological resources to repair the tissue and reinforce it. We'll talk about the biological resources, in a bit, but it needs time. And that's what sleep gives you, is it gives you time. It's the main period during which the body shifts into a repair and maintenance mode. When you're asleep, especially during the deeper stages of sleep, so that's REM and deeper, the body can devote more energy to tissue repair, to protein synthesis. This is key, which this is the process of building and repairing your body proteins, which includes muscle tissue. It engages immune activity, which is important for overall health. It doesn't engage all that much when it comes to hypertrophy, but it's a related system, and restoration of energy stores. So that's that process of restoring your glycogen stores inside your muscle tissue from that glucose that's in your system. Sleep also supports hormonal regulation. Hormonal regulation is the body's chemical signaling systems, keeping them in balance, right? That's essentially what hormones are. They're signaling chemicals. Good sleep supports the release and timing of hormones that are involved in recovery and muscle maintenance. So specifically, they were talking about growth hormone, HGH, and we're talking about testosterone. Those are both very important when it comes to recovery and muscle maintenance. Women have testosterone too, by the way. It's not only men. Appetite regulation, which is important here. So that's things like leptin, insulin, and ghrelin. And then stress management, which is your cortisol level, right? It's about cortisol is an important thing that you need to have in your system, but having too much is a problem, having too little is a problem. And when you're sleeping, that's when that cortisol regulation kicks in. Poor sleep tends to push the body in the opposite direction. So you have more physiological accumulated stress because you don't have time to recover from the previous round of stress. You struggle with your appetite control. You'll either stop eating or you'll eat too much. And your physical recovery conditions are suboptimal. It's not going to be very good. So you're going to struggle with your hypertrophic response. Sleep helps the nervous system to recover. Resistance training doesn't only fatigue the muscles, although that is its principal function. It also fatigues the CNS, the central nervous system. That means the brain and the spinal cord, which coordinate effort and movement. Now, these things, kind of think of them as just being sort of passive wires, but that's not true. They actively employ effort every time you're using them. And that effort is stress, and that stress can accumulate over time, and you need time to recover from that. Sleep helps to restore your alertness, your coordination, your reaction speed, and the ability to produce force effectively, which again is both a muscular function and a neurological function. So sleep is your kind of daily reset for your nervous system. Before we keep talking about sleep, I want to mention here, because I don't think I mentioned it later, there is such a thing as cumulative nervous system fatigue. So through training regularly 3 to 5 times a week, week after week, there is a kind of cumulative fatigue that builds up over time, and that needs to be allowed to resolve itself from time to time. So you're going to want to, every couple of months, every 8 to 12 weeks, you want to take a week or two of what they call deload. So that is when you're doing a much smaller amount of physical training for a week or 2 weeks, depending on how long you need, to allow all of that recovery backlog that's been on the back burner and not fully resolving itself every night, because your daily reset doesn't do all of it, gives all of that a chance to catch up with the training that you've been doing, and then you can then kick back into your regular training routine again. Now, deload doesn't mean doing no training at all, although you can just take a week off of training if you want. That's one way of doing it. It could just mean doing light training. That's acceptable as well. But it's effectively, you can think of it as like a pressure valve. That pressure will build up week after week, week after week, week after week, and you're going to start noticing long-term fatigue effects. You're going to notice that you can't think as well. Your executive function is compromised. Your physical gains at the gym are compromised. You don't feel like you have the physical resilience to get through that workout the same as you did a couple of weeks back, and you're going to feel that consistently. Your personal best time on at park run on a Saturday is going to deteriorate as well. So if you can give yourself that release after 12 weeks or whatever, of a week or two, and then get back into it again, you're going to be able to pick back up where you left off and come at it at full speed again with all of your resources mustered behind you. So deload weeks are important every few weeks, but your daily reset is your sleep. So let's go back to sleep. Sleep improves your learning and your movement retention. So movement is a learned skill. So it is mechanical, but it's also a skill because it's engaging the nervous system. And as with any skill that you're learning, and this is true whether you're studying classical philosophy or contemporary jazz music, or learning how to do an isolation bicep curl, it is a skill that you learn, and that skill is consolidated while you're sleeping. So it's consolidating your motor learning. So the process by which the brain strengthens your newly practiced movement patterns. So those neural connections that are formed when you're developing those new skills, those are solidified and kind of baked in while you're sleeping. So if you're learning better technique in a squat or a bench press or a deadlift or anything like that, sleep will help you to learn, will help that learning to stick. Sleep also affects your emotional discipline. So poor sleep tends to reduce your patience, motivation, and emotional regulation. I'm sure you've noticed this. If you've had a poor night's sleep, you're a little bit closer to the surface the next day. Things are People are more likely to get on your nerves, you're more likely to snap at people, you're more likely to get grumpy and have a mood swing. That is because your emotions are not properly regulated by having insufficient sleep. And it makes it harder to train consistently because you need to have your emotions under control in order to manage your training regimen. It's harder to tolerate the discomfort. It's harder to make good decisions about your effort, your recovery, and your nutrition, which is key. So physical rest and relaxation outside of sleep is also important. Body also benefits from periods of reduced physical stress. So training all day, every day, also not a good idea. A couple of hours, that's a good limit. And then you want to be spending as much time during the day relaxing as you can. Not every hour should be spent under load, especially under tension or under pressure. You want to provide your muscles, your joints, your connective tissue, and your nervous system some downtime so that it can start initiating those repairs. The bulk of the repair is happening while you're sleeping, but the stuff that you're doing when you're at rest and not asleep, that's going to be supporting your recovery as well. So just regular relaxation helps to reduce your systemic stress. Systemic stress is the total stress burden. I keep knocking my microphone today. Systemic stress is the total stress burden placed on the body by training, work, poor sleep, illness, life in general, all of your daily stresses. And if the systemic stress stays too high for too long, then your recoverability decreases. Main mechanism that's happening there is that your cortisol level is going to get too high. And if your cortisol is too high, then that's going to interfere with your sleep. So having some downtime that is not sleep, and however you choose to relax, like works, right? Having a good per scan device that can monitor your heart rate is a good way of telling just how effective your relaxation strategy is. If you're doing something that you think is fun, it doesn't mean it's not fun, but it might actually be stressing you out. Again, stress not necessarily a bad thing. But if you can monitor your heart rate, your stress level throughout the day, you can see which activities you were engaging in actually were the ones that were reducing your stress the most, or things that were most relaxing. And then you want to try and optimize your time spent on those kinds of things as well. Again, not at the expense of doing your work or anything like that, but when you can, you want to be spending time relaxing, whether that's watching TV, playing games, chilling with friends, playing with your pet, whatever it might be. Another form of recovery is gentle movement and active recovery. So not all recovery means just sitting there doing nothing. It can look like a light walk, some mobility work or stretching. So that's something like yoga or Pilates, although those can get pretty intense. Doesn't have to be intense. And even a relatively intense yoga or Pilates session compared to a proper workout is really not that bad. Even if it gets pretty uncomfortable on those deep stretches, you're not doing as intense a workout as you would be if you're doing a proper deadlift. Easy swimming is another one. Other low intensity movement can help the circulation and reduce stiffness, which is going to make your recovery process that much more comfortable. So that's active recovery, low intensity activity used to support recovery without adding significant fatigue. So you don't want to be working so hard that you're making yourself tired. You want to be working just hard enough that you can help to stimulate circulation a little bit and help loosen things up after your workout. And why this is beneficial. So it can help the body feel better between harder sessions. And feeling better doesn't mean it is necessarily better, right? But having that discomfort of delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, that could be a pretty strong deterrent, mentally speaking, to getting back into the gym the next day. So if there are steps that you can take to help reduce the discomfort from DOMS, then that's probably a worthwhile effort. So a little bit of light activity can actually help to mitigate that discomfort. And also promotes movement without interfering with your repair. So movement is a good thing, even if it's not providing active stress, and it doesn't trigger that repair response because it's relatively light. And then the other category, which is worth exploring here, is emotional and physical comfort. So the basic mechanism here is that recovery is helped by shifting the body away from a threat-oriented state and towards a restorative state. And it looks like this. So the autonomic nervous system has different modes of operations. You've got the sympathetic nervous system, which is associated with arousal, vigilance, or the fight or flight response. That's your psyched up response is the sympathetic nervous system. And then you've got the parasympathetic nervous system, which is associated with rest, digestion, recovery, restoration. So sympathetic is up, parasympathetic is down. In reality, it's not a simple on-off switch, but it's more like finding a balance between those two systems. You want the one, if you're in situations where the one system is dominant over the other for too long, then that becomes a problem. You want to be able to find a meaningful balance between those two responses. Chronic stress keeps the body tilted towards the sympathetic activation. So that means you've got higher physiological arousal, not the other kind of arousal, although it could be that. Physiological arousal means sort of in an aroused emotional state. More muscle tension. Your body actually responds to emotional stress with muscular tension, and your muscles will physically tense up. That's why you get a sore neck, or even a headache from stress. It's not the cortisol building up in your brain. It's usually the muscles in your neck that are tensing up in response to that stress, in response to that sympathetic nervous system response. What it does is it gives you greater alertness, which is important if you are in a high stress situation, because you need to be alert, but it also is draining on your emotional resources. And a body that's allocating resources towards immediate survival rather than long-term repair. So it's just everything's on alert. It's trying to keep systems up and running, but it's not repairing any of the damage that's been incurred. So it's useful in an emergency, but it's not useful as a permanent lifestyle. You don't want to be living your life in that state, because your body's not designed to recover optimally while it's behaving as if a tiger is in the room, right? You don't want your nervous system thinking that you're permanently under attack. You need to be able to feel like you're safe some of the time. So states of calm and safety promote the parasympathetic activity. And this is sometimes called the rest and digest, as opposed to fight or flight. So in a parasympathetic state, your heart rate will be lower, your breathing will be calmer, your digestion works better, and your body is generally in a more recovery-friendly condition. And the key mechanism here is the regulation of the HPA axis. It's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is one of the main neuroendocrine systems involved in the stress response. Neuroendocrine just means that it links the nervous system and the endocrine, or the hormone system, neuroendocrine. When your stress is high, the HPA axis helps to drive the release of cortisol. Again, that's the long-term stress hormone. And now, again, cortisol is not evil. It's quite important. It helps to mobilize your energy and manage your stress. But when the stress is chronically elevated, the body spends more time in a wear and tear state, and that is less favorable for recovery. It means you're not going to be able to recover from those workouts. Positive physical contact can help shift the body towards a calmer state. This is an interesting one. So affectionate touch from another human being, closeness, and emotionally secure social contact can reduce perceived threat and promote relaxation. Interesting piece here is that your skin has the ability to detect when it's being touched by another human. It's remarkable. There's a particular sensory organ in all of our skin. It's a particular kind of fiber. I've forgotten what it's called now. I wish I could remember the name. But its sole function appears to be to detect the physical contact from another human touching you. Even through clothes, even through fabric, you can tell the difference between a human touching you and an inanimate object. Even if the inanimate object is something that's soft and vaguely the texture of human skin, if it's not human skin, you can tell the difference. Remarkable. Humans are amazing. But it obviously needs to be positive physical contact. It can't be negative physical contact that's unwanted or unwelcome, or from somebody you don't know, or aggressive in nature or anything like that. It must be positive. So that affectionate touch, that closeness, and emotionally secure key social contact can reduce perceived threat and promote relaxation. It helps you to feel safe. And the one hormone that's often associated with this process is oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It's involved in social bonding and in trust and in affiliative behavior. So that's recognizing other people as being part of your in-group. It's often linked with calming and stress buffering effects, although people sometimes will oversimplify oxytocin as being this kind of wonder drug. It's a real thing. It's not space magic. It has specific functions and specific roles physiologically. Those just happen to be pretty beneficial. And there are downstream effects on other systems from this kind of activity as well. So when your stress is reduced, your breathing can become slower and deeper. Your muscle tension may decrease, so your tight neck can start to relax, and the cardiovascular system can start to settle. And that creates a more favorable internal environment for recovery processes, for sleep quality, and for overall restoration. So psychological safety matters because the brain helps to determine what the body thinks is happening. If the brain perceives ongoing threat, conflict, instability, emotional strain, the body will behave accordingly. Again, that's sympathetic nervous response. This means that recovery is not purely mechanical. It's influenced by your perception, by your environment, by your social context, as much as it is, if not, no, as much as by training and nutrition. And the body recovers better when it does not think that it's under threat. Calm, safety, and positive social contact help shift the nervous system into a more restorative mode, reducing stress chemistry and supporting recovery. Recovery is a discipline in itself. It's not laziness. It's not just being passive. Recovery is a necessary component of effective training. Rest isn't the absence of progress. It's part of the process that allows progress to occur. And this is especially important for people who think effort alone is enough, right? If you're one of those people, you know those people. More training is not always better. There's a limit to how much training is beneficial. And better recovery often produces better long-term results than simply adding more work. All right, let's talk about the equipment involved in resistance training. So physical actual equipment. So the first thing I want to talk about is, no, you know what, let's first talk about locations and we'll come back to equipment. It makes more sense in that way. So locations are, these are the places that you can do resistance training. So probably the place you think of most obviously when you're thinking about resistance training is a commercial gym. You go to the place, the Virgin Active, Planet Fitness, whatever it is, and it's a room full of machines and weights and people lifting heavy and looking at themselves in the mirror. Now, commercial gyms are great for a number of reasons. One, they provide a wide variety of equipment and loading options, right? You'll find free weights at a good gym. You'll find a selection of free weights, a selection of machines. You'll find group classes, you'll find all kinds of cool stuff that can help to facilitate your specific training requirements. Commercial gyms are great. Downside of commercial gyms is that they are often expensive. You might need to shop around one that's affordable for you. They can be a little bit inconvenient. You have to actually get in your car and go to the gym. So that is adding more time to the process, which, you know, that's going to affect the viability quotient to some extent. And sometimes you just don't like being around other people while you're training. For some people, myself included, I like to have that sort of group vibe going on because that sort of feels like group accountability. All the people in the gym are all accountable to each other because we're watching each other train. Nobody's actually watching you, but it feels like everybody's watching you and holding you accountable to your own goals. And that's the aspect of it that I enjoy. But not everybody likes that. Some people find that uncomfortable, and that's fair. Another option is a home gym. So this is something that you build up yourself at home. So this is using basic equipment, and let's talk about equipment now. So the kinds of equipment we're talking about here are free weights. So basic equipment like dumbbells. This is the dumbbell. It has two large bulbous bits on either end and then a grip in the middle, and you get them in different sizes. You also get adjustable ones where it's just the bar and you can smack weights on either end, and that's cool. And you can buy these and build up a collection of these that sit at home. I'm not sure if you can see clearly. The commander's collection is on this shelf over here. She's got a selection of various dumbbells. There's also kettlebells. We don't have a lot of kettlebells. We've only got this 16 kilo one. Looks a little bit different. It's got a big round weight at the bottom, and then it has this the handle at the top. There's different exercises that you can do with that. And then you've got the barbell, which I didn't bring inside. You can kind of see it resting on its stand over there. It's just a long bar, and typically you can slide extra weights on either end of it to adjust the load that you're lifting. And if you're using a barbell, you probably want some kind of a bench with a stand like this so that you can rack the weight. You don't need somebody to help you with it. Those are the basic equipment that you're likely to see, but you also see things like resistance bands. So these are elasticated bands, might be made of latex or silicone or rubber even. at different levels of tensile strength, and you can select your tensile strength based on the load that you're wanting to push. You can hook them onto things, you can wrap them around yourself, you can do all kinds of interesting things with resistance bands. And those are also a relatively inexpensive option for building up your home gym. The thing about a home gym is that you don't have to buy all of it in one go. You can build up your collection a little bit at a time. So if you buy yourself a basic set of weights that match your current requirements, because of progressive overload, you're going to need to add more weights to the collection as you go. But you can do that relatively slowly. Spend a couple $1,000 the first month building up your basic collection, and then you can spend a couple $100 every month to increase that collection over time. In terms of money, it probably adds up to roughly the same amount as a cheaper commercial gym contract. But the nice thing is that the equipment is all yours. It belongs to you. You can access it all the time. It's in your home, and it is more convenient and more private if that's the kind of thing that you like. Another option is outdoor facilities. We see this all the time here in Cape Town. I've seen it less often, but I've seen a few of these in other cities around the place as well. And these are, they call them fitness parks, gym parks, trim parks, various things like that. These are public spaces out in public parks where they have equipment that is specifically designed for you to work out on. And these things, they look like kids' jungle gyms, but sort of built for adults. And there'll be things like pull-up bars and push-up bars and crunch tables and all kinds of interesting stuff that you can push and pull. As opposed to free weights, there'll be equipment that's sort of anchored to the ground, and you use it there and then. Those can be great too. Nothing wrong with that. They're usually free to use, and you can, it might take a little bit of creativity, but you can get a fair amount of stuff done there. So those are the kinds of places you might go to do your training. And the kinds of equipment that we're talking about there. So I showed you the barbells and dumbbells. Those are the things that are generally referred to as free weights. Resistance bands I've mentioned. There's also body weight exercises, and there's a major category of exercises that can be done simply by offering resistance by your own body. So something like a pull-up, you're doing that. You're just lifting your own body up and down. A push-up is kind of like a bench press, except you're lifting your own body. If you can't do a proper push-up, or you can't do a lot of proper push-ups, you can take a little bit of the weight off by like bending your knees or whatever. There are lots of techniques that you can learn in order to build a full body weight workout. Limitation of doing body weight is that once you're able to comfortably lift your body weight for reps, you've kind of hit the maximum of what you can do. So if you're doing 100 reps, 100 push-ups or whatever, and you can do that comfortably, like where do you go from there? That's probably about the time you should consider investing in some physical equipment that you can then load on top of your body weight. But body weight on its own can get you a fair amount of the way using nothing else. Another set of equipment, which is something that you'll typically only find at commercial gyms. You can buy these for your home, but it's expensive. They take up a lot of space. Generally, at commercial gym is where you go for this, and that is training machines. So these are machines that allow you to do typically only one or two specific exercises in them. So there's a bench press machine and a chest fly machine. They call it a pec deck machine. All kinds of machines that allow you to do one specific exercise, but they're big machines. They allow you to adjust the load. There'll be a stack of weights, and you pick whichever weight you want, and away you go. Now these are they're useful for people who are beginners, people who train alone, so people who don't have a spotter. If you've got somebody with you to help you, that's called a spotter, then you can push nice and heavy on free weights. But if you prefer to train without a spotter, free weights can be a little bit risky because maybe you'll drop it on you. Maybe you can't re-rack the weight before it falls down, that kind of thing. If you're nervous about that, I'm a little bit nervous about that myself, then you might prefer to simulate those movements on a machine. Older people as well, which includes me, or anybody wanting a safer or a more controlled training environment, they might prefer machines. Machines also reduce technical complexity, so you don't have to pay as much attention to your technique because the machine is doing a lot of that for you, right? The machine only goes in one direction. It only does that. It doesn't allow the weight to drift around. You don't have to stabilize it like that. You kind of can't do the exercise wrong on a machine, or at least it's more difficult. So the risk of injury is drastically reduced. It's especially useful if you're doing isolation exercises for that exact reason. The downside, though, is that it's somewhat less effective than free weights when it comes to developing your stabilization and whole body coordination. So there are machines that allow you to do um, compound movements, like you can get a Smith machine that is basically a machine that allows you to do deadlifts or squats. But a free weight is probably going to give you a better workout just because you have to stabilize the weight, and that's going to make you even stronger doing that. So machines are beneficial and can be an important part of your workout. Strictly speaking, you don't need them. You can get the same workout using other things, but machines are nice. There are some simpler machines that aren't limited to only one workout. Those can be your cable machines, where you've got a loop at the top, a loop at the bottom, and you've got different shape attachments. It can either be a straight bar or a single hook or something like that. You attach to the cable and you can either pull it down or you can lift it up. You can do dozens of different workouts on that one machine, and that's quite a versatile machine. If you're going to buy a machine for home use, that's the kind of machine you'd want to be buying. It's one of those cable row machines. But that can be quite expensive, possibly prohibitively expensive if you're building a home gym. All right, those are the kinds of equipment that you want to be thinking about when you're building your workout. Now, there's no right or wrong way of doing any of those things. Choosing your own workout based on your own requirements, your needs, your preferences, that's something that is intensely personal, and you're going to have to work with your trainer to do that. When I say trainer, we're living in a great time where it's no longer necessary for you to work with a human personal trainer. When you go to a commercial gym, the first thing they're going to try and do is upsell you on getting a personal trainer. And that might be nice. You might like that. It's going to cost a fortune. And it's probably not necessary, because the best trainer you could ever want is right here. ChatGPT is a fantastic trainer. The more information you give ChatGPT about your goals, your progress, your situation, your current progress, what you're hoping to achieve, the better workout ChatGPT can devise for you. It's really, really good at doing that. If you want something even more specialized, there are other AI supported applications like the RP hypertrophy app. That's a little bit more expensive than ChatGPT, but it's great. It's custom designed AI app specifically to help you with your hypertrophy goals. But you know what? ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, any of those could do a really, really good job on their own of putting together a great workout for you. It can even help you with your form, right? So if you might be a little bit embarrassing in a public gym, but if you go to the live mode and have it watch you do the exercise, it can give you some hints and tips on how you're doing the exercise. It's great, and it's free or cheap. Getting a personal trainer in this day and age is increasingly difficult to justify. Again, if that's something that you want, you feel it would be beneficial for you to have an actual human going through the stuff with you, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just no longer necessary. You can have all or most of that same experience by invoking an AI, and it's fantastic. All right, let's talk about nutritional support. So nutritional support it relates more to the recovery side of things than to the hypertrophy side of things, or to the training side of it, but it is essential. It doesn't matter how hard you're lifting. If your nutrition game isn't on point, then you're not going to make the gains that you're looking for. So resistance training provides the stimulus for the adaptation. Recovery provides the opportunity to repair, but nutrition supplies the materials that the body needs to recover and to grow stronger. So think about how this was working again. When you're lifting, you're creating little injuries, little damage. Sleep is the time where your body goes in and repairs it, but it needs stuff, physical stuff, to make those repairs with. It needs to build new muscle. What's it doing that with? Nutrition, food. So few fundamentals are necessary to understand. Nutrition sounds complicated, but it's not as complicated as it sounds to sort of grasp the fundamentals. And then there's lots of nuance where you can tweak things and adjust things after that. But the fundamentals are relatively straightforward. The things you need to know. Protein, very important. It provides the amino acids that are required to repair and build muscle tissue. And this is the actual building blocks that muscles are made of, is amino acids, and protein is the best source of getting that. You can supplement amino acids if you feel like you need to, but generally speaking, dietary protein is more than enough. Recent protein is a little bit complicated in the South African context, is because we are about 10 years behind the rest of the world in terms of easy dietary protein sources. In a lot of Western countries, you can walk into any supermarket and find just about anything that's enriched with protein, and it's easy to come by. In South Africa, we're only starting to see that coming in now. So you actually have to pay particular attention to ensuring that you have sufficient protein in your diet. It's not that difficult. You just have to be paying attention. In the South African diet, it's very easy to overspend and overindulge on carbohydrates, which are important too, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But that means that you've got less room in your diet for protein. So you have to be paying conscious attention to ensuring that you're getting enough protein in. Eating nothing but protein also isn't advisable. You need carbs too, but paying special attention to making sure that you're hitting your protein target is quite important. Carbohydrates are the next macronutrient that are relevant here. So carbohydrates are the fuel source that powers intense physical activity and helps with maintaining your training performance. So carbohydrates are the fuel that allow you to train. Protein is the building blocks that help you recover afterwards. Carbs before training, protein after. General rule of thumb. You need to have enough carbohydrates to power you through your workout, or you're not going to be able to hit those weights. So carbohydrates matter. Carbohydrates matter for other things too, like your brain runs on glucose. Like you need to have carbs in your diet, very, very important. But in terms of supporting training, you want to make sure that you have sufficient carbohydrates before and also some carbohydrates after, because you need to be able to sustain your other biological systems while you're in recovery. So carbs important. In the South African diet, very easy, trivially easy to make sure that you have enough carbohydrates in your diet. In fact, it's difficult not to have too many carbs in your diet. It's so overabundant and cheap and easy to find. So protein is the thing you should be focusing on, but carbohydrates matter too. Other macros and micros matter as well, but those are the two most important ones that you really need to be paying attention to. Then we can talk about creatine. So creatine is a supplement. It's a nutritional supplement. And it increases the availability of quick energy in the muscle cells, and it improves your performance during short bursts of high intensity efforts such as weightlifting. Now, creatine is, I've spoken about this a couple of times before as well. Creatine is a nutritional supplement. It is the second most studied performance enhancing supplement known to scientific literature. The most studied one is caffeine. Caffeine's great, has similar benefits. I'm not going to talk about it much here. But creatine is important for hypertrophy and recovery because its presence facilitates the transfer of stuff in and out of your cells, basically, water and glucose specifically. Being on a creatine supplement daily, and you want just straight creatine monohydrate, you don't want any of these fancy things that call themselves creatine, because there's not good evidence supporting the bioavailability of those other creatine sources. Just regular creatine monohydrate, that's the one you want. Somewhere between 5 and 10 grams a day is probably a good dosage for just about everybody. Creatine is something that your body actually produces on its own, and you can get it from dietary sources. You'll find it in most animal-based protein sources, meat, dairy, that kind of thing. But it's one of those things that having more is better up to a point. So lots of creatine, then that's the kind of levels that you're getting from a creatine supplement, just a little spoonful of powder on your cereal and your coffee, whatever, once per day. That's going to get you 10x the amount of creatine that you would get from dietary sources, and that's going to be even more beneficial than dietary creatine. There's some research coming out now that mega dosing on creatine, so not just 10x dietary sources, but 100x dietary sources, has some benefits too. But it's worth keeping an eye on that research. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think there's enough evidence to support recommending that at this stage. I think it's too early. There are some people, myself included, who believe that they are creatine intolerant. Turns out that is almost certainly not true. Virtually nobody is creatine intolerant. Check with your doctor to be sure. If your doctor tells you that you're creatine intolerant, maybe get a second opinion. Because I was told by a doctor that I was creatine intolerant, and then I got a second opinion, and the second opinion told me that I was not creatine intolerant. Turns out that's not really a thing. So creatine, good. Recommend it. It even has additional benefits that go above and beyond hypertrophy and muscle gain. It has neurological benefits, that kind of thing. Creatine is awesome. Even if you're not doing resistance training, creatine is still beneficial. So creatine, good. Next important thing is hydration. You want to make sure that you're drinking enough. Adequate fluid intake is essential for muscle function and recovery. If you're dehydrated, everything starts to shut down and it's not going to work. Again, you don't need to be like there's 8 glasses a day or 2 liters a day nonsense is mostly a myth. You're getting plenty of fluid from just about everything you eat or drink, including coffee, including energy drinks, including Diet Pepsi. All of those things are perfectly adequate hydration sources. You just want to make sure that you're getting enough fluids during the day. If you're underhydrated, you're going to start having cramps. You're going to your recovery is going to be stunted. You're going to struggle sleeping, all kinds of stuff. Being dehydrated is not good. You want to make sure that you're getting sufficient hydration. There's no magic number to how much fluid you should be taking in a day. You just want to make sure that you're kind of not thirsty. Then there's the caloric balance. Now we've done a whole briefing on this thing specifically, and that is, so let's just say that strength improvements require sufficient total energy intake. So you need to be consuming enough to support your hypertrophy. Chronic underfueling is going to limit your adaptation, because if you don't have enough fuel to power your workouts and you don't have enough protein to manage your recovery, that's going to be a problem. Eating too much is going to have problems in the other direction, because now you have a surplus of energy and you're going to start storing it as fat. It's going to increase your weight. It's going to impede your progress. So you want to be balancing your caloric balance, your energy intake per day, at a level that's suitable for your current goals. Whether you're at maintenance, so you want to make sure that your weight is kind of maintaining a steady level, then that's fine. You kind of want to learn what your maintenance level is at any given point anyway. You want to do that by testing yourself. If you're in a bulk, which means that you're in a phase where you're trying to stimulate as much hypertrophy as possible, you're going to want to be eating a little bit above maintenance so that you've got extra energy available and extra protein. If you're in a cut, which means that you're trying to lose a little bit of fat, you want to be eating below maintenance, but not too far below. If it's too far below, then it's going to compromise your muscle gain, and it's going to affect your overall body composition in a negative direction. So you want to be balancing it nicely, a little bit up, a little bit down, or more or less steady. That's where you want to be. And you want to be tracking that precisely. I recommend the tool MyFitnessPal. It's on your phone, on your pad. It's a great tool for that. You just have to develop the discipline of actually using it, and then it becomes an invaluable tool. I use it every day. Which brings me to the next point, which is tracking your progress. And this is quite important because you need to be able to see where you are. You need to get a picture. You need to build a console of what you've done with all of your hypertrophy work, with your resistance training work. You need to know where you were, what you did in your last workout, and how that's getting you towards where you're heading. So you want to be logging your training. There are fitness apps that help you do this. PerScan is also going to help you do that. Or just a simple notebook and pencil. A lot of people are still into that kind of thing. They're living in the last century. That's fine. My personal recommendation is an Android app called Gym Run. If you get the mid-tier premium version, you don't have to go for the expensive tier. It's compatible with the Wear OS PerScan device. You can program in your workouts ahead of time, and then it prompts you on your wrist, go to this machine, set the weights at this, lift at this time, let me know when you're done, and then you tap done. If you are able to get a couple more reps in than last time, then you can adjust your reps here and it'll remember it for your next workout. If you feel like you're ready to go into the next weight, then you can adjust that here as well, and then it'll remember that for the next workout. It keeps a history that you can export, and it's very cool. So Gym Run is a great one. It's not the only app that does this. There are plenty of other apps there. That's just the one that I use, and I find that it's pretty cool. So Gym Run, MyFitnessPal, ChatGPT, those are the software tools I recommend using. What you want to be doing with all that tracking, though, is you want to be making sure that you are seeing gradual and consistent improvement over time. And if you're not seeing improvement, then it's time to go back to ChatGPT and ask for advice on what you could do to resolve your plateau, which is what the pros call it. Means you're plateaued, you're no longer seeing results. Now, ChatGPT is going to recommend one of several different things. Either it's going to recommend that you take a deload week, or it's going to recommend that you change up your training program because you have neurologically adapted to that particular workout. You're not able to progress any further, so you need to change things up a little bit, or something along those lines. ChatGPT is a great source for doing all of that stuff. So we've gone a really long time, longer than I thought, again, but at least we didn't hit the 2-hour mark this week. At least not yet. Could still happen. but I'm going to move on to my closing thought, which is to say, resistance training is the structural maintenance program for the human body. Endurance keeps the engines running, but strength reinforces the frame. Over time, consistent strength training produces a stronger, more durable officer capable of meeting the physical demands of the mission. All right, let's see if we have any questions or comments. Yo, lively chat today. While I'm scrolling back up, I'd just like to say welcome to Captain van Grienen, to Colonel Hubert, and to Lieutenant Lively. Thank you for joining us in the chat today. Let's see if there's anything I need to respond to here. Lots of memes. That's good. Always like to see the memes. Okay, from Captain von Kroonen, this is a test. Test succeeded. From Lieutenant Lively, we had a group question. What's your formal opinion on milk? Oh, okay, milk. That's a good question. Milk is it's a pretty good component to a diet. It has a relatively high protein content. Has calcium, has a little bit of sugar in it, so that's good. It's a relatively good beverage to consume immediately after a workout, right? So it doesn't have a high carbohydrate content, so I wouldn't recommend it before workout. After workout is good because it's got that protein content. I've heard a lot of people claim that chocolate milk, so you'll find that in South Africa branded as like a Steri Stumpy or something like that. So just milk with some chocolate flavoring in it is even better for a beverage to consume during your workout, because then it's got a little bit extra, a little more sugar in it, a little more carbohydrates than regular milk. So that's going to help fuel your workout. And it's got that little bit of protein in it that's going to help you with your mid-workout recovery. And especially once your recovery starts kicking in after the workout. So milk is cool. Chocolate milk, apparently even better. My personal preference is whey protein, which is, it's a dairy byproduct. It's extracted from milk, so they take out all the protein essentially from milk and they turn it into a separate product. It doesn't taste a lot like milk, but it is kind of milk-like, which is similar, I guess. In the absence of whey protein, just regular milk is probably a good substitute. Have I tried the higher protein chocolate milk? Yes, I have. I have some in my cupboard. There are a few other different flavors. I've got a strawberry and a banana and peanut butter, and I think there was a caramel. They're delicious. They're very good. So these are one of the first specifically branded high protein products that have made it to South African shelves. It's made by a company called First Choice, I think it is. They're a dairy company, and they've released a range of high protein chocolate milks. It just comes in a little cardboard carton, and they're delicious and relatively well priced. They've got something like 21 grams of protein per serving, which is actually a pretty good yield, and it's something like 4 or 500 kilojoules, which is decent. It's actually comparable to a whey protein shake. So it's a solid option. If you don't have access to your whey protein out in the field, you can pick up one of those at your local supermarket, and it's a solid alternative. And it tastes good too. Most of the chocolate milk is low fat though. Yeah, that's true. So a lot in the South African markets, flavored milk, so Steri Stumpy, that kind of thing, is typically low fat. Fat is not necessarily that big of a deal. Fat is an important macronutrient that you want to factor in, make sure that you've got sufficient of it in your diet. But when it comes to muscle building, it's not a direct contributor to this process. So the low fat isn't that big a deal. What it does mean is that the chocolate milk will be relatively low in kilojoules. That's fine. That's not necessarily a problem. All right. Okay, I think that is all. Oh wait, my yeoman had some questions too. All right, let's address those. First one. Can I just do cardio instead? Cardio is cardiovascular exercise, so that's things like running, swimming, cycling, rowing, that kind of thing. And the answer is no. Cardio and resistance training do very different jobs. Cardiovascular training helps to improve your endurance, your ability to do stuff for long periods of time, and it helps to improve your heart-lung efficiency, makes your heart stronger. So your heart is a muscle too, and cardiovascular training, cardio, is building your heart, and that's important, right? You don't want to be neglecting that, but it's not going to preserve or build your muscle. If you look at people who are endurance runners, so people like marathon runners, and you look at their physical build, they tend to be very lean. They don't have a lot of muscle mass. And while they might be good at running, that means that they're not going to be all that resilient once the running stops. Muscle mass is still beneficial. So it's also not going to help with your bone density. It's not going to help with your force production. It's not going to help you be able to lift heavy things as effectively as resistance training does. It's not that it does none of those things. It just doesn't do it anywhere near as effectively. So for full comprehensive mission readiness, I recommend both. You want to be doing cardio regularly as well. You can even mix it, right? You can in your workout time, you can do some cardio and some resistance training. Some people will say that if you do one, it breaks the other, or vice versa. That's probably not true. That doesn't seem to be supported by the evidence. You can quite reasonably do a cardio workout and a resistance workout in the same workout. Just make sure that you have enough carbohydrates to fuel both together, and that should be fine. Or you can do them in separate sessions, whatever works for you. Having both is definitely beneficial, but they're not doing the same thing. You're not replacing one for the other is not a good idea. Next question. Am I too old, too unfit, or too inexperienced to start resistance training? And in most cases, no. Resistance training can be scaled to almost any starting point. The key variables, which are load, volume, exercise selection, range of motion, and choice of equipment, those can be adjusted to adapt to the individual and your specific circumstances. In fact, people who are older, who are deconditioned, so these are people who are maybe in their 60s or 70s, who are already starting to feel frail, or other people who are physically limited, often have the most to gain from resistance training, because the resistance training helps to counter the sarcopenia, right? So it's not only slowing it, it's not only halting it, it's actually reversing the sarcopenia, which is the age-related loss of muscle, and it reduces the drift towards frailty. Even things like osteoporosis. Now, exercise can't fix osteoporosis, but it can certainly help your body become stronger to mitigate its effects. So, never too old to start, probably not too old. Again, if you have any doubt about this, consult your doctor. But cardiovascular, resistance training is good no matter how old you are, no matter how out of shape you are. You can start somewhere. Even if you're lifting a 1 kilogram dumbbell, that's a good start, and you'll work your way up from there. Third question. Do I have to join a gym and lift heavy barbells for this to count? No. A gym is useful, but it's not the only way to do this. We talked about training from home or doing body weight training, that kind of thing. Resistance training can be done with any number of different sets of equipment and under different circumstances. So joining a gym might be a nice way of doing it. It's my preference, but it doesn't work for everybody. So whatever works for you. I would caution against joining a gym if you haven't done any resistance training work before, because it can be quite overwhelming. Stepping into a gym for the first time, not knowing what you're doing there. And what a lot of gyms, especially in South Africa, but I imagine the same thing happens in a lot of other places too, they can engage in what is essentially predatory behavior, where they will do their best to get you to sign up for a contract. They'll bill it as a 2-year contract or a 1-year contract so that you're paying every month, and then they will try to discourage you from actually showing up at the gym. So what that means is they can bill you for a service that they have no intention of actually providing. So any given gym can have X number of subscribing paying members, but only a subset of those members actually show up and use the facilities. They don't actually have sufficient facilities to accommodate all of the dues paying members. And well, why don't you just cancel the contract, you may ask? I'd like to see you try. Successfully canceling a gym contract in South Africa is virtually impossible. Very, very difficult, especially the big commercial gyms, Virgin Active and Planet Fitness. Not a reason to not use those services, just caveat emptor, buyer beware. Trying to get out of one of those contracts is very, very difficult. But there are still benefits to using a gym. The sheer variety of equipment available is great. I find it very useful. And for me, it's partly about that, and it's partly about the ritual of forcing myself to get out of the house. I have to get in my car, drive to a place, do my workout, and then come home again. To me, that makes me feel more accountable to myself for the whole process. For other people, that extra administrative period of having to drive somewhere and do a thing and then come home again, that adds too much cognitive burden to the process and actually discourages them. And that's fine. Whatever works for you. I find the gym is a good place to do it, but your mileage may vary. Okay. That I think is all the questions and comments we needed to address. So I'm going to call it here, but I'm going to leave you with this thought. Resistance training is difficult. So is becoming fragile, tired, and physically limited. That version just arrives later when your options are worse. Mission readiness means choosing deliberately to build the strength, the resilience, and the discipline required to meet the demands of life and to serve as the best officer you can be. Thank you. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.
The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes